Love Lights.
Hello.
My name is Boyle, and I am very proud to say that I have been attending Unity of Fayetteville for 24 years. And this is just an amazing church. There we go. This is just an amazing place to grow up spiritually. And I have to admit that when I first started attending Unity of Fayetteville, I was a hot mess. She's laughing because she knew me back then. I was actually in an abusive marriage. And I had just been kicked out of my master's degree program because, as previously stated, I was a hot mess. I was depressed, I was anxious. And the only thing I had in abundance was lack mentality. And so Abraham Maslow talks about how once our safety needs are met and our physiological needs are met, the next need that we're hardwired as human beings to seek is belonging. And I don't know if you know much about abusive relationships, but the way that an abuser keeps that person in that relationship is to keep them isolated. And I was very isolated, so I started seeking, I started reaching out. And Larry and CJ told me about this really cool church called Unity. And so I showed up, and on that first day, much like today, when our thoughts, our prayers was being sung, tears were rolling down my face. And I knew two things for sure. Number one, I knew I had come home. And number two, I knew that the words in that song were true and that I was really messing myself up with my thoughts and my words. And I started to come to this church regularly, not as regularly as I do now, but I started to come. And I still wasn't feeling as much belonging as I would have liked to. And I believe it was Catherine who approached me one Sunday and said, I'm going to be teaching a class called 4T, which is tithing of time, talent, and treasure. And I was like, well, I can't afford that. She was like, well, we're going to buy the materials for you. We want to give you a scholarship. And I was like, really? Me? And so I started hanging out with Annette and Rosvitha and Catherine, who was Kate back then, and Mary and George and Cindy, who goes to ORI. And I really started to get a sense of belonging. I really started to feel my worth. And through that worth, through that worthiness, eventually I was able to get myself out of that abusive marriage because I knew who I was, and this church had helped me to have a sense of belonging so I could get out of that situation. Now, Brene Brown says, staying vulnerable is a risk we have to take if we want to experience connection. And I think Annette is a shining leader in being able to stand up here and talk about her vulnerability and the things that she's been through. And I myself have been very vulnerable in this church. I've gone through more breakups than I care to count here in front of all of these people. But these guys have held me through those experiences and have been here with me through all of my difficult times. When the man who had abused me, my children's father, passed away, he never really came to this church. I don't think he ever came at all. But this church did a funeral for me. I couldn't afford that for myself and for my children. So Catherine officiated a funeral for my ex-husband and helped. We had so much food and so much care that we had been given. And there are a lot of people here who maybe have received from our care team or from a meal when you have gone through hard times. And I want to tell you a story about Renee.
Yeah.
Is that who we're talking about? When you said that, I thought that was Renee that was not happy about the song not being played.
Yeah.
So Renee was a wonderful woman. She came here for many, many years. And it came time for her transition. And her daughter had a phobia of hospitals, and Renee was in the hospital. Her daughter was devastated. She couldn't be with her mother on her deathbed. And she didn't want her mother to be alone. So what she did was she came to this church and she asked us, could we please be with her mother so her mother didn't have to be alone during her transition. And we took shifts going up there and hanging out with Renee. And we helped her. Because there's no more vulnerable place you can be than you're at when you're making your transition, right? And we were there for her. That's the kind of community this is. That's the kind of love tradition that we have at this church. There was an interesting study at Harvard. It was actually a longitudinal study over 75 years. They had to have 3 different research teams because people kept like either retiring or leaving their jobs, right? So this study involved 724 men. There are 60 of those men that are still alive, and they call them every year. And they're trying to figure out what brings happiness. What is the formula for a long life and happiness? And the people that were in the study were comprised of poor men from inner city Boston and Harvard students. Apparently, when they call the poor men from Boston, the men are like, why do you keep calling me? My life just isn't that interesting. And apparently the Harvard men never say that when they're called. So they had these students, and what they found was that when we have positive connections, that we are healthier, we live longer, we're happier, we have better brain function. So this community that we share is protective. It's helping us in many ways that we aren't even aware that it's helping us. And the opposite has the opposite effect. When we're isolated and alone, it's toxic to our body, it's toxic to our emotional system. So this is our Unity, and we came here to check this Unity out many, many years ago. I got invited to come with a group of people. It was so exciting. And we checked out this church. It was not nearly as beautiful as it is now. We have loved this church up, and it's way different looking than it was. But I have a funny story about Catherine when we came here, because we were looking around, and she was wandering around back in here. And she, right now you can go from one side to the other probably if there's not too much stuff back there. You can walk from one side of our storage area to the other. Back then, Catherine thought she could too, and ended up she thought she could walk on water because there was a cover over the baptismal that used to be back there, and splash, she fell right in. I wish she was here hearing me tell this story on her. She'll hear it later, I'm sure. But that we all embraced her in love and her vulnerability. We all did that. So this church has had such a huge impact on me that I just wanted to talk about the impact of the love of this church and what impact it's had on me. And the thing that has impacted me the most was my 10 years that I was with the youth of this church. Now my son, he was a YOUer, which stands for Youth of Unity. And I called him and I told him, hey, I'm giving a talk on the impact that Unity has. Don't you think that it still is impacting you that you were in the YOU group? Don't you still use the things that you learned at rallies and in the lessons back there? And he said, well, I don't use them as often as I should, but the tools are in the tool belt. But it's impacted my kids. My kids are amazing human beings from coming to this church. And it's really impacted me in a lot of ways. But the YOU, we used to do Christmas plays. And that's where I started my writing, actually. I'm an author now, but I started writing Christmas plays, and that's Ray up there in the back with the star on her head. I don't know if you guys can see her. She always comes at the end. She still hangs out back there with the kids and helps out back there. We had 20 kids at one point in time in this group, and that prayer room back there used to be our YOU room, and we would just pat in there like sardines and have so much laughter and fun. It was so great. And then we also did a lot of service projects. We planted hundreds of trees. We picked up thousands of pieces of trash. We even went on a float trip and picked up trash along the river. That was my favorite service project, actually. But this particular one, we all made outfits out of things that could be recycled. So like grocery bags and paper things. Like this is all us in outfits made out of recyclable items. That was at a festival we were at where we were helping raise awareness about the earth. We even hosted a rally called Love Your Mother, and we had hundreds of kids come here to Mount Sequoia, and we taught them about what a precious gift the earth is. So the YOUers made a huge impact on me. They've helped me I'm a counselor for teenagers, and they helped prepare me for this job that I'm in. They helped prepare me for my speaking career, because once you've spoken in front of 200 teenagers, nothing can faze you. And then they all wrapped me in love. It was so beautiful that, you think teenagers, they get a bad rap in society. But no, they weren't critical at all. They were just loving and accepting of me when I was up there in front of them. So these kids were really preparing me for the journey that I was going to be on. And the love in this church has prepared me for the career, the business that I have in addition to my job, but also for my job. So where did I start writing music? So I was playing the flute in a Christmas play here, not a Christmas, a musical thing. And John Ray said, "Oh, can't you play by ear?" And I was like, "No, I can't do that." He was like, "I bet you can." And so he just encouraged me. And so I was able to learn to play music by ear. But then Annette started this music group where we would have people who would come, and some people were musicians who had written songs, and other people were the audience. And for the first 2 times, I was the audience. But then I got inspired and I started writing music. And so I have 5 songs that I've produced, and I feel like that they're uplifting. They're part of my mission on this planet, to uplift everybody I come into contact with. And hopefully my music does that for people. Also, I'm a Reiki master. But I met the Reiki master who gave me my Reiki master attunement here, Rick Blau. Gave me my Reiki master attunement. And my very first Reiki class was taught at this Unity. Now I've taught over 100 Reiki students, and several of them have gone on to Reiki 2 and Reiki Mastership themselves. So this church planted a seed that grew to where now Northwest Arkansas has an ample number of energy healers. And there are other people who are doing this as well, but I have been able to bring some energy healers onto this planet to help because of the influence of this church. I'm also an author. Now, my book was inspired in a class that I took here at Unity. Eric Huber taught the Artist's Way class. How many people took that class? It was a great class. Yeah, so it's a great book. I would highly recommend it. But one of the things in that book says that you go every week for 2 hours by yourself somewhere and do something that inspires you. The thing that inspired me was hanging out at a coffee shop and writing. And I had this notebook, and I wrote a book called In the Beginning. And the book blessing for that book, guess where it was? Right here at Unity. Because this church has supported me in every dream I've ever had, in every goal I've ever had. The people in this church have been there for me and moved me forward and helped me to become who I am. Which also is a counselor. And I tell you, it is so cool to be a counselor with a 24-year background in Unity. Because cognitive behavior therapy, they talk about like meditation and mindfulness. And so, because that's the kind of therapy I do, I teach about meditation and mindfulness. I've meditated over 1,900 hours using the app that I use. And a lot of those hours have been sitting with Annette or Catherine or Ben Worth. And I teach the mindfulness activities that Ben Worth taught us at silent retreats. I teach those to my clients. I teach them about the power of their words and how their words can create a more positive impact in their lives. I teach them about EFT tapping, emotional freedom technique that I learned right here at Unity. I teach them how to get out of their depression and into their joy, which is what Unity did to me, for me, with me. Finally, being an inspirational speaker, which I really love doing. I love getting up and loving all of you guys and just sending you energy from my heart. And I probably would have never had the courage to do that if I hadn't started right here at Unity, speaking in front of people that I love and that love me, and that I knew wouldn't like throw tomatoes at me or boo me, because this is the loving community that supports me. There is so much love in this church that it spreads out to the world. Our love spreads to the grounds. So, how many people have walked the labyrinth before? It's so cool. Do you know that there was a pile of sand out there for months? I'm serious. Like, the YOUers really enjoyed it. I think that they were playing on it more when they were spreading it. We were all trying to spread this huge amount of sand that we were... Was it donated? It was donated, right? I think
James and his mom.
Oh, wow, cool. Yay. Awesome. So there was this huge pile of sand, and every Sunday it seems like there was people out there just trying to put the sand all around in a circle. And the YOUers would sled down it with those like round sleds, you know, so we put the energy of play into it. But it took a really long time, but finally it got spread out enough where we could lay the rocks. And now we have this wonderful resource for ourselves and for our community. And these cute little love rock gardens up front. You know, that's one of the newest trends out there, but it's so cool. Like, people can come and like take a rock if they want, or leave a rock if they want. And so even as you're approaching the building, the love is right there for you to take or to leave. There's also the rain garden. Now, this is part of our Green Church initiative. Annette worked really, really hard. I don't remember how long it took her to get this church certified as a green church, but there were a lot of hoops this woman jumped through to get this.
Catherine and I jumped those hoops.
Yeah, Catherine and her jumped through a lot of hoops to get this certified as a green church. But this rain garden that the YOUers and the adults of this church worked together to build is part of that, because it's an environmentally friendly kind of thing to do on our property. As well, and this kind of explains a little bit more about the rain garden, but also we have a prairie restoration project. So that we have natural native things growing in all this extra property we have where animals can come and survive and live. And we recently just did a project where we bought 60 trees as part of a million tree project. I know, it's really cool, the impact that this church makes. We love this church. We have so much love here that we even spread it to our community with our sister circle, our Sisters in Spirit does Change for Change that we donate to the food bank. And we have a little food house box out there that people put canned goods out into for anybody who needs food that is hungry and wanders along. So our love spreads to the planet, it spreads to the community. Isn't it beautiful, the love that we create right here in this building? It's so amazing. So, I would be remiss to talk about what a wonderful love tradition we have at this church without talking about the wonderful leaders that we have had over the years. I'm going to start off by talking about Gary and Jane Simmons. Now, my first day at this church was Gary's last day, and so I didn't get to have a whole lot of interaction with him. But one thing that I was told is that he was famous for being gone right after church. Like, you could not ask him a question, talk to him about anything. Like, after church was done, he was out of here. But he was the person that founded this church. He was like the person that started this love tradition. He had the vision for this love tradition to move on. Now, it was 2 ministers later when his wife came back and started being our minister. And Jane was so cool. Jane was awesome. And I'll tell a funny story about Jane. She came to me one day, white as a sheet, and she said, "Bonnie, the teenagers, they're climbing the church." And I was like, "Oh, well, I'll go check that out." So I went out front, and there were 4 teenagers. You know the little bar that goes across the front up there? They were perched up there just like little birds, just sitting there. And they thought, we were talking, I said, "Y'all are freaking out, minister, get down." So anyway, Jane had a really cool catchphrase, and I believe that catchphrase probably survived all this time since she's been there. I'm going to say, because God is good all the time. I knew that would happen. What a legacy. Everybody, she used to do that every single Sunday. She'd say, "God is good," and everybody would say all the time. And that survived all these years. Like, everybody remembers that God is good all the time. What a legacy to leave, right? Then we had Cindy. Cindy really was into movies. She was really cool. She was into spiritual cinema. So she believed that movies had metaphysical lessons. And the whole time she was a minister, we would have like a movie night here every week. We'd come and have popcorn, watch movies, and then we'd talk about the spiritual essence of the movies. And she liked to say that we're spiritual beings having a human experience. And that's how the movies were. Like we get caught up in the illusion on the screen, and we're just like all, but really, we're projecting that image onto the screen, aren't we? We're creating our own reality with our projecting eyes. Then, of course, our wonderful Catherine, who still comes to this church. And Catherine is such a light. She has been an amazing teacher to me. She leads silent retreats that have changed my life. And I am grateful for her friendship and for her leadership. And Catherine, her catchphrase is, "What would love do?" Like, Catherine is all about love. She's like basically a big heart walking around on legs. And one day I told Catherine, you know, when I grow up, I want to be you, Kate. And she said, no, you want to be Bonnie. And she was right. I did want to be Bonnie. And I wanted to be the Bonnie that this church has helped me to grow into. So, yay! This picture is the epitome of Annette. This captures her enthusiasm. It captures her love for the planet. There's a planet with a heart right there in front of her. This is Annette. And we all know what Annette says, right? Notice how you feel. Right? Notice how you feel, because she wants us to be present. She wants us to be present with that God-like, that source of who we are, with whatever we encounter in this now moment. She's calling us home to ourselves. And I'm very grateful. She has grown tremendously, as have I, in this church. So I want you guys to say our mission statement with me, please. Inspiring transformation, we enrich lives. I can't emphasize enough how this church has changed my life, and how this church has enriched my life, and how this church has made me who I am, and made me the person that can go out to the world and make the impact that I make in the world. But this is the place where that happens. And I guarantee there are people in this audience who feel that same way, that coming to this church has enhanced your life and has made your life better. And if you're newish to this church and you have not experienced the impact of this church, stick around. Go to a cleanup day. Join a class. Because you will be impacted in a positive way. You will find community and belonging, and you will find that this is a safe place for you to grow and be vulnerable and to connect deeply with others. And it'll lengthen your life, and it'll make your brain function better, and it'll make you happier. So I just want to say thank you to all of you for being a part of my spiritual family, for being a part of my spiritual community, because it's you and the love that you have brought to this church that has made me who I am. Namaste.
So we're going to sing a song that, and then Bonnie is going to lead.